Hi, good day, everybody, and welcome to CX Excellence Chats with Anjali. It's the podcast that's all about transforming your business through the power of customer experience. I'm your host, a CX consultant, and with a passion for customers and constantly finding novel ways to relate CX with business success and business metrics. In each episode of this podcast, we will dive into the strategies and insights that can potentially help you achieve your business objectives, albeit with a customer lens. Without further ado, let me invite our guest for today. He's Mr. KV Dipu, Senior President and Chief Operations Officer at Bajaj Allianz General Insurance Company. Welcome, Mr. Dipu.
Thank you, Anjali. It's a pleasure to be here talking to you and, of course, delving into our favorite topic, which is customer experience.
Lovely. So, sort of start by asking you that I understand you have a dual role in the company. You're head of operations and you have a large workforce of 1,000 plus people, and you're managing, a base of 140 million customers over 1,000 locations. I thought that number was fairly overwhelming. So I'm sure you'd like to talk about that a little bit. But you also straddle digital transformation and innovation. So between these two very high focus, domains, how do you balance the view to CX and your allegiance to this subject?
Thank you, Anjali. I think that's an interesting question to start off our conversation with. Our belief is, that the ones, who are basically closest to the process and to the customer are the ones, who actually understand customer needs and can therefore, innovate and drive transformation. And that's the reason, these two hats in my role. Now, coming to the first part of my role, which is keeping the lights on, as you rightly said, we have a huge customer, employee, and partner base, and that's something which you drive with passion, and that's where the mission of the organization comes to the fore. We are in the business of insurance. We'd like to come to the aid of people, when they are in trouble, and that's precisely where us as a noble industry, and that's what drives us, day in and day out. Secondly, coming to transformation. The landscape is constantly changing. Your customer expectations are rising. The world around you is changing. So you can't just bank on what has worked for you so far. You need to, constantly be on top of your game in terms of figuring out, what are the various trends in the environment, what are some of the latent needs of customers which they don't express. How do you join the dots and therefore come out with innovative products and solutions which keep you ahead of the game? And I think the customer lens, helps us be on track in both the roles. In the first role is, as I said, it's about keeping the lights on. You understand your customer needs and then, you cater to them. In the second role, you basically anticipate customer needs and then you stay ahead of the game. So that's how, I balance my day in terms of, managing both these parts of my role.
So would you say CX is pretty integral and central to your, overall strategic thinking and direction?
Absolutely, Anjali. In fact, if you look at our mission statement and our logo, it basically says caringly yours. We are in the business of care. If you look at insurance, we come to the aid of customers, right, when they are in trouble. When your car has had an accident, when you're hospitalized, if your house is on fire, right, we are the ones who come to your aid. So clearly, since we are the business of care, customer experience, is right up there in terms of a strategic orientation.
No, I think that's an absolutely noble mission to have and to pursue. Clearly, people think of insurance when usually there's a time of grief, right? But a lot of the time, the feedback that we get from customers is that the claims processes are complex and it takes time and there's a lot of haggling at times, etc. So how are you as an industry, working to simplify this for customers?
That's a very interesting question, Anjali. And that's because if you look at the whole insurance life cycle, the moment of truth is the claims process. See, the reason you buy insurance is so that, during your rainy days, the insurance company can come to your aid. And I gave you the examples up front. Now, what happens is, from a customer's perspective, he'd like the company to pay the claim as quickly as possible. Now, as far as the industry is concerned, while the industry wants to pay the claim, the company wants to, of course, pay a claim. This is an area where, unfortunately, we also see a lot of frauds. So, what the industry has to do is to weed out the fraudulent customers while paying the genuine customers as quickly as possible. And it is in this process, in terms of weeding out the fraudulent customers, that the industry, is trying to constantly improve its processes so that the genuine customers, can get paid as quickly as possible. And let me also share, a very interesting statistic with you, which is sometimes not known to customers. There is a metric, a financial metric called combined ratio, which is what is used in the Indian insurance industry. It basically indicates how much money you spend for every 100 rupees that you earn. And the combined ratio in the Indian insurance industry is 120, which means for every 100 rupees that we earn, we actually spend 120 rupees. And the bulk of this is in claims. So in fact, the industry pays a lot of claims. But what happens is, in the quest to, weed out the fraudulent customers, sometimes when some genuine customers undergo a delay, that is when, this feedback or this perception comes to the fore. So the industry, is trying to figure out various tools to ensure that they accelerate the claims process so that they can catch the frauds while paying the genuine customers as quickly as possible.
No, I totally appreciate that. In fact, when we look at claim settlement ratios, which is what everybody touts as one of their key metrics, right? And it's out there displayed and promoted. Usually it's always upwards of 90%, mostly upwards of 95%. But this 2 or 3% gap, which is because of fraudsters or whatever other use cases, it leads to a lot of lack of trust. And I think that's one of the key banes of this category, and tough to deal with, because the percentage may be small, but the halo effect of that on consumers' perception per se could actually be more lasting. And actually, that also impacts not just the claims process, but also the purchase process. For instance, I remember buying my policy, a couple of years back. I was changing, and it wasn't an easy process. And talking to agents and brokers doesn't make it simpler, by the way, because the formats and the comparison charts that they make have just so many terms and conditions, exclusions. It's kind of difficult for a simple layperson, and I was from the industry, I still found it difficult. But for a layperson, it's fairly complex to take a decision as to what to buy. And am I making the right decision? Am I doing it with the right person? Is this the right policy for me? What would be your advice to somebody who's planning to purchase, so what steps they should take and how to make it simpler, and how to sort of counter when we in this entire process of buying?
Yeah. A very relevant question, Anjali, because the whole idea is the purchase process, across industries, right, has to be as simple as possible, right? If it is friction free, then obviously customers like it. Now, what customers should do, right, is to keep some basic principles in mind. One is, obviously, assess your own personal condition, in terms of what you'd like to buy, whether it's health insurance, whether it's motor insurance, whether it's, home insurance, assess your own condition. The other is today, thanks to the, availability of data. Today, in fact, we consume more data, than we'd like to. So there is, a huge amount of data out there. There are plenty of sites, which give you comparisons. There are plenty of, there's plenty of customer feedback out there, in terms of their experiences, with various companies. So I think a good amount of research, can take customers, to the right place. The other thing which we've seen, and Anjali, you also mentioned that you've been in the industry, is that insurance continues to be a push product. More than 95% of insurance sales, still happen through distributors, be they banks or agents or brokers or, e-commerce companies. So the trusted intermediary that customers deal with, right? Either they have their own agent, or sometimes through word of mouth, they can go to the near and dear ones. But if you can get referred to the right intermediary, he or she can guide you through the entire insurance process, because that person has been in the business, basically understands customer needs. They also know which companies pay claims, which companies can come to your aid when you need it. So I think if you have a good guided buying process backed by your own research, right, I don't think it's too difficult, to buy an insurance policy. And in fact, buying some insurance policies today is very easy. For example, if you're buying travel insurance, it's very easy. Make a payment, and
Yeah.
the policy is instantaneously, is there in your mailbox. So it depends on the product. Some products are simple. Some products, have a long gestation period.
Yeah. No, I understand that motor insurance, even home insurance, is not that complex now, but I still feel that health insurance could be simplified. For instance, post-COVID, we have seen uptake, at least a need for health, and the consciousness towards health and wellness has gone up so much. It's so evident in the number of startups that have come up in this domain, the number of new products that are being introduced. I think Ayurveda as a category completely leapfrogged, right? So in order to aid all of this adoption, what kind of measures have you guys taken to make it? I mean, of course, you can leave it to the customer to say do more research, but what has the category done to kind of make it easier for them or make it more accessible for them?
Yeah. No, good question, Anjali. I think, in the aftermath of the pandemic, we've seen a spike in awareness and interest. So as an industry, there have been, various steps. One, of course, is simplification of the language and the literature, right? Because like you rightly said, sometimes, customers find it difficult to understand. I think there have been, plenty of efforts, to basically simplify the language, which goes out to customers. The other is today, when you look at customers buying, health insurance, right? They don't just buy it for illness; they also buy it for wellness, right? So today, you look at customers, availing of various products, from the entire health ecosystem, and insurance, is just one part of it. So I think that again, is a way by which the industry has gone beyond just focusing on the very simple need of illness, right? I think there's a lot of information out there in terms of how to take care of yourself, right, and how to ensure that during your entire life cycle, you basically keep health as a priority. The third is, of course, in terms of services. Uh, During the pandemic, we were able to digitize a lot of services for customers, right? So whether it's claim settlement or whether it's buying of a health insurance policy, when everybody was working from home, the servicing was uninterrupted. People could do, digital medical tests remotely and get policies issued. They could also, upload documents remotely, and get claims processed. And a lot of that has carried on, even post the pandemic period. And therefore, today, buying the health insurance policy today compared to what it was pre-pandemic, there's been a dramatic shift.
No, I completely agree that the process has become simpler and far more digitized, and customers are more ready than ever to lap up digital channels. So that has certainly happened. But I still
Right.
think that, there's a lot of room for people to understand and appreciate these policies better. So tell me, I mean, obviously, since you had innovation and you talk about, bringing out these new ideas and stuff, how do you have like any specific practices to listen to customers, or to sort of learn from them or to pivot given their needs and so on, for not just for journeys, which is the most usual thing that, okay, this is where I had found complexities. So, okay, let's stitch this up, do this better, digitize this. Those are probably the quicker wins, but the tougher ones with regard to, their new needs or what they require in terms of products. What kind of practices do you follow around that?
So Anjali, rightly pointed out, right? The customer is the fulcrum, right, for everything that we do. See, one is, we are a large and established company, right? We are 22 years, into business. We have a huge customer base, so we do come across a lot of feedback from our customers, which is readily available. Customers who contact us in the course of regular business. So we come across a lot of feedback. The other is we also conduct, customer surveys and focus group discussions from time to time on specific areas, where we'd like to understand what their needs are. Now, once we put it together, see, there are two ways you can, manage customer needs. One is the stated articulated need, which is straightforward. Customers express their needs, and then you go about, remanaging your processes or products, to cater to the needs. But I think more importantly, what we do, and I think that differentiates us, is we try to understand what a customer's latent needs. Sometimes customers don't express all their needs, but if we can read between the lines and figure out their latent needs, and then meet them, then we can stay ahead of the competition. Now, let me explain that with an example. During the pandemic, when we're talking to customers, right? Customers would typically, let's say those who had minor ailments, right? In case they were talking to us, they would tell us saying there's a lockdown. And even if you go to the hospital, COVID patients are prioritized. Where do I go, right? If the minor ailment, but even a minor ailment needs to be treated. I mean, you cannot let it go unaddressed. So at that time, what we did, hearing out these customers, as I said, this was not a stated need that they wanted a solution, but we just heard this in the course of the conversation. We actually came out with a simple solution where we told our customers that in case of a minor ailment for which you're not getting a solution from the health ecosystem, come to us. We have a mobile app, and we, of course, being in the business, we have an empaneled set of doctors. So all you need to do is to log into our mobile app and have a digital consultation with our doctors. You can do it over text, audio, voice, video. The doctor will examine you remotely and digitally, and then give you a digital prescription. And then all the customer needed to was to go to a medical shop and buy medicines. And customers just loved it, because it was not a stated need, but we came out with a solution. So I think like this, when you have listened to customers actively and come out with some of these solutions, I think we've been able to stay ahead of the game. So you're absolutely right. It starts with the customer, be it listening to them reactively or proactively, Because unless and until you're solving a customer problem or creating a new customer experience, the innovation is not going to go anywhere.
Sure, sure. So how often do you, do these practices? I know a lot of companies would do customer days where you take a whole day off and you just listen, you along with, your distributors and stuff like that. Of course, there are regimented processes of listening, which I'm sure you have, and there's a lot of data that you would have, say, even from the call center or from social media and so on. How do you sort of work with so many different input points, and how does that kind of create like a process? And is there like an ownership or a central repository of all of this that you've created where you mine this information?
Yeah, of course, there is a central, source of data whereby, we gather data across multiple modes, and then, we analyze this data, to come up with solutions. But your point on frequency, we listen to customers every day, every single day, because unless you do it on a daily basis, right, you're not going to pick up the pulse. I mean, a month can sometimes be too long, right? So every day we listen to our customers, right? We have enough listening posts, in terms of figuring out what our customers' latent and stated needs. And then, we of course, look at the data in a holistic manner, right? And then try to see how can we, using a combination of domain expertise, which is listening to our customers and data, then how can we come up with, unique products and unique processes? And I think that's what keeps us going, as a company.
Wonderful. So, that brings me to a point on, when we talk about experience, and a lot of the experience is about A, giving resolution, B, being accurate in those resolutions, and three, standardizing that experience, right? Because each time a customer interacts with you, and could be any touch point, he needs to feel equally well or better each time in terms of the way the whole process went. Now all that is well and done when your processes or your touch points are digitized, because you can still automate a whole lot of the output, but in the case of insurance, a lot of your touch points are human, right? And this is a whole paradox between how much to use digital transformation and how much to use the whole human factor and human interface, because whilst the more the world is going digital, there is a lot more craving from people for empathy, for personalization, for connections. So how are you sort of A, balancing these two things, and B, whilst balancing them out, how are you ensuring standardization of the experience delivery through the human interfaces? Because in your case there'll be agents, brokers, call center. It's just so many different variables, and it's very difficult to control the impact of that on the customers. So this is a two-part question.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, I think absolutely, relevant point, for our discussion. And Anjali, like you rightly said, you can standardize the experience when you digitize the process, because then it's automated, right? And machines don't have mood swings. Machines are consistent. But when it comes to human beings, then standardization, is not in play as much as it is, when you digitize the process. So I'll tell you what we've done. One is to your point. Yes, I think at the start of the pandemic, the whole onus was on digitizing the physical. But I think over a period of time, as people got used to the efficacy of bots, it subtly shifted from digitizing the physical to humanizing the digital. How do you get, the best of machines, yet get, the empathy and, the listening skills that human beings have? So what we've done, we've leveraged a good combination of man and machine. So for example, in our chatbots, right, if let's say a customer speaks to our chatbot and the bot, for example, got stuck, there was a query which it was not trained on, we wouldn't ask the customer to terminate the chat. The bot would transfer the call to a human being who would take it through to completion. So for the customer, there was no break in service. So that was one way by which we managed combination of man and machine. Now, to your point on how do we, work on standardization when there are human beings interacting with customers, like you rightly said, it's a distribution-led business. Therefore, there are plenty of people. Similarly, in our own business, there could be a lot of touch points where human beings interact with customers. Now, the answer to that is very simple. When it comes to human beings, you cannot standardize the experience because every human being is unique. But what you can do is try and bring in elements of consistency so that every person who interacts with the customer is able to demonstrate that caringly yours approach. So it's about standardization of the caringly yours approach rather than the experience per se. Because if you speak to two different human beings, you might get two different experiences, but the outcome is one which is going to be caringly yours. So we have done a few things there, and here's some principles at work. Principle number one, we have told our frontline associates that you will stand up for the customer inside the organization, right? Even if it means, that you need to interact with, various departments, and then fight your way for the customer, because the customer is right unless proven otherwise. So that's point number one. Point number two is empowering them, right? Because when customers call you, it obviously means, that they need a solution first. It's not about, again, going through the whole rigmarole or going through the whole SOP. So they are empowered to, close the case and, resolve the customer's issue, and then work backwards to figure out, how do we modify the SOP, to make it more customer friendly next time around. So these are two things, which we keep in mind. And we also measure these experiences. We measure them through NPS. We measure them through, transaction touch points, so that everybody knows, that at the end of the day, the caring leaders experience is being measured. And glad to let you know that, consistently over the last decade, through independent market research, we have come out as toppers on NPS in the industry, and by a mile compared to our competitors.
Oh, that's amazing. So you're saying this whole ethos of caringly yours is actually carried through to the front line. I think that's a
Yes.
great culture intervention, because
Yes.
the only way to manage, a huge, resource like people, and which is such a varied
Right.
and heterogeneous resource like people, is through culture interventions, where people start to create a similar value system and a similar belief system, and that starts
Right.
to drive. So even if I've had a bad day at home or wherever else, it doesn't impact the way I'm talking to my customer, because then that value sort of plays out. And it's great to be able to actually embody that and deliver that on ground. And you're saying that Bajaj
Absolutely.
Allianz is able to do it.
Absolutely.
Very
That's what we focus on. Like you rightly said, culture. Drive the right culture, then you ensure standardization of at least the
Mhm.
approach and the experience, even if the individual transaction, is different.
Agreed, agreed, agreed. In fact, to your point on, bots, we've all seen everybody going for bots, and suddenly a huge downfall in saying, hey, it's the experience is just not great. So, let's bring back the agents, because beyond a point, that personalization, that touch doesn't happen. And the last thing people want is robotic, experience, and somebody who's giving you very templated replies without really understanding the essence of what you're saying. So true, that I think it's cyclical. We learn things and we unlearn them. And this, even with chat GPT and gen AI, generative AI, as we say, there's such a huge upswing in terms of saying how it's making creation of content so much easier, and how we are adapting it everywhere. And suddenly everybody's saying, but stop using those templated replies. Please bring in the human touch. And if it's been written by a human and not by a robot, I'll give you a premium for it. So, it's cyclical, I would say, right?
Absolutely. I think the whole idea is machines can automate, basic tasks. But when it comes to empathy, when it comes to, complex scenarios, you need a human being who can think on his feet and resolve the issue, and also give, empathy and a healing touch to customers. Because customers don't call you during good times. They call you when they're in trouble. They don't want only a solution. A solution, is just a part of the overall package. They also want, someone to listen to them, and give them a shoulder to cry on. So I think, there's a born
Yeah.
again focus on human values.
Totally, totally, totally. But despite that, I still feel AI is making huge strides in the way we are delivering service to customers. Even in customer experience, there has been a bunch of different, use cases and demos that have been done for personalization, for conversations, for resolutions, and so on and so forth. Where have you seen, AI being successful, and maybe even a use case where you think it's not been so successful? I'm sure you've tried a bunch of these things out. So what's your take on that?
So, Anjali, see, when it comes to AI, it depends on how you use AI, right? At the end of the day, AI is a tool in the hands of, firms and corporations. So, like I mentioned, I gave you the example of our own chatbot, right, which we had launched prior to the advent of COVID-19, because we had not forecasted the advent of the pandemic. We had just embarked on a digital transformation journey. So, our bot was AI driven. It could basically understand customer utterances and then, give resolutions. And like I said, you cannot plan for all scenarios. So in the event of a scenario where the bot got stuck, the bot would transfer it to a human being and then take it through to completion. At the back end, we would maintain an inventory of unresolved queries, and using AI and NLP, we would keep teaching the bot. So the bot, would keep learning, and over a period of time, increasingly, give first-time resolutions to customers. So that's how, we leverage, AI, during the pandemic. I'll give you one more example of how we leveraged AI, and this is in the area of claims. Like we mentioned, the claim is the moment of truth in the insurance process. So let's take motor claims. The motor insurance is the biggest line of business in the general insurance industry in India. And typically, what would happen earlier if you crashed your car? You would call up the insurance company from the site of the crash. They would send a surveyor who could take his time because he may not be readily available. You're waiting there. He comes there. He examines the extent of damage. He submits his report to the insurance company. They would go through it, approve, reject, or whatever decision they take, convey it back to the customer. Right? The whole process could take days. We said, how do we kind of launch this process? So we deployed AI, and what we did was we taught an engine using our years of expertise. So now for the customer, it became a simple process. In case of a car crash, the customer need not call up the company to ask for a surveyor. The customer can just take images on his own and then upload them using the mobile app. So it's a two-step process. Just click photographs and upload them. Simple. At the back end, since there is no surveyor, these images would be seen by an AI engine, which will go through the images very quickly. It can, read the images very quickly, figure out the extent of damage, and it's very granular. It can make out whether a part needs to be replaced, whether a part needs to be repaired, how deep is the dent, so on and so forth. And in less than 20 minutes, up to certain amounts, it can convey the amount back to the customer. That you send the photographs, and this is the extent of damage. The moment the customer gives a consent, we could immediately transfer the money using a digital payment option. So in like 20 minutes, right? I mean, that was unheard of. So that's how we were able to use AI to even bring down the claim processing time from what could take days to less than 20 minutes. So I've given you two live use cases, of where AI is. And to your point on Gen AI, now AI, is going to its next point of inflection, right? Which is where, we're going to use Gen AI.
Right.
And, that's clearly, going to be part of our landscape in the months to come.
Sure. No, I think this video analytics use case is pretty enlightening. I've worked with a couple of startups who have also been creating these solutions as a provider to the insurance companies, and we've seen
Right.
work with millions of pictures to teach the algorithm to sort of understand the difference between small dent, big dent, and get
Yes.
the accuracy of the
Yes.
information up to 95% and more, because unless it
Right.
does that, the risk to the company is very, very high. So yeah, I think
Absolutely.
that's an absolutely wonderful use case, and clearly a great demonstration of how tremendous impact to the customer from number of days to a few hours. So yeah, and that's a, I think, great example. Let's move to the question on personalization. Now, so much is being talked about how customers want to be understood as an individual rather than, a mass of a certain whole, right? And how data is today helping us to sort of be able to recognize each one for their demographic, for their geography, for their transactional information, for the value they bring, and so on and so forth, right? And especially when you're heading operations and you're looking at, say, retention or persistency or lifetime value, and these are all key metrics, personalization will go a long way in terms of helping people, or even cross-selling, right? People feel connected to the brand and feel, it's relatable. And how does that impact your KPI? So A, are you doing it? B, how are you being able to do it? And C, how is it really impacting your outcome metrics?
Again, a very relevant theme, Anjali. I think the whole perspective is that today customers are increasingly digital, therefore their footprint is digital, and therefore you have data. So when you have data, then you might as well get into segmentation of one, right? That's a customer need as well as a business opportunity. So clearly it's there. And to your point around how are we doing it? So what we did was a few years ago, we moved to the cloud. Now one of the benefits of moving to the cloud is the data which was residing in silos, in data marts, across the entire organization. Now it coalesced, into a single data lake. So what that does is, it gives you a 360-degree view of the customer. So a customer service associate, when a customer calls, right, the associate has the entire history and is therefore able to give, more personalized service to the customer. Let me give you one example, of how, personalization, but in a different context, helped us, during the pandemic. Let's say a customer would go and click on Google Maps. Now, what would companies do? Typically, they would want to ensure that their address is updated, because you don't want the earlier address being getting reflected in all the digital channels out there. So the whole focus would be on ensuring that your address is, your contact information are as real time and accurate as possible. But we said, here there's an opportunity. If a customer is clicking on a particular branch, it possibly indicates, that he wants to go there. So now, why do we need to wait for him to go there? So what we did was, we worked with, players in the ecosystem, and a bot would pop up, and then ask the customer, I see, you clicked here, would you really want to go to the branch, or can I help service you? Now, for the customer, it becomes a delight, right? And we were
Yeah.
in many cases able to obviate, the need for the customer to go to the branch. Now that is personalization, taken to a different level, where the customer, is like really, happy. So across all assets, right? Whether it is the website, whether it is the mobile app, whether it is the bot, whether it is, customer service associates, right? If we are able to give a personalized experience, clearly it shows in metrics. So, and to the point that you made, has it made a difference to our outcomes? I mentioned you done on NPS, which is independent third party market research. We've pretty much, been tops of the industry, and by a huge distance, over our competitors. And also, if you look at the number of customers that we have in terms of our retention ratios, clearly it shows, because we are able to have those individualized experiences and conversations with customers. And having said that, it's a journey, right? It's a journey which is on which we have embarked, and we'll continue to keep fine tuning our approach.
Sure, sure, sure. No, but that was a great example. Reminded me of the time when it was a few years back in Starbucks, and I was walking down this road, and it says turn right for a hot cup of coffee, and there was a Starbucks there. So, using these
Absolutely.
geolocation services, and that's what the
Right.
example you brought to the fore, that you were able
Right.
to use geolocation services to help people to get something addressed there and then. I think fabulous
Yes.
example, and of people, trying to help people, so you don't have to reach out, but we reach out to you when we know you're looking for us. I
Right.
think great example, and thanks for that. You talked a lot about innovation, right? And you have been saying that we keep thinking out of the box and we keep ideating for the customer. Share with us a couple of ideas. I mean, you've shared with us some already, but beyond these, any other CX ideas which you think have really made a difference to the way customers relate with your brand, or perceive it, and maybe that's why the relationship, you say their NPS is strong, so clearly people are bonded stronger to you. So what do you think
Sure.
are those things?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I can share quite a few examples, Anjali, because we are in multiple lines of businesses, and we have a huge customer
yeah,
base. But let me share maybe two
yeah.
or three. So one is, let's look at travel insurance, right? And we had done this now 6 years ago, right? This was using blockchain. So what had
Mm,
happened was, at that time, if let's say you had taken an international travel insurance, let's say you're flying from, I'll take your location, Delhi. Let's say you're flying to New York, right? And then let's say your flight is delayed. Now,
mm,
it creates a lot of angst in your mind, right? Because you need to catch the next available flight, which may not be available immediately. You would have
mm,
to plan for, all the contingencies, in New York, because you're going to land there maybe a day later. You may have to
mm.
cancel, the hotel booking that day, extend your trip, and then therefore, make a booking, for the, for an additional day at the end of your trip, reject some of
Sure.
your business meetings, so on and so forth. So at that time, if somebody were to tell you, that you're eligible for a travel insurance, it wouldn't be a priority. And then you would think of paperwork. Oh, I need to get into this whole rigmarole of, giving so many documents. So we said, how do we minimize customer effort? So what we
Mm,
did is, and we said, why should the customer tell us? So we took the onus on ourselves, and by leveraging blockchain, we put ourselves in a situation where we would get to know that the flight is delayed. So instead of your reaching out to us, we would reach out to you and say, we understand your flight is delayed, and we wish you, a very smooth process, and we wish to inform you that you're also eligible for a claim payout. And in terms of paperwork, now you don't need to go to the airline. You don't need to, give us a letter saying that, the flight is delayed or anything. We only need to know that you're on that flight. The money would be transferred to you. Now imagine, for the customer, such a huge delight, right? You're sitting in the airport and hassle, and the insurance company, is proactively reaching out to you. We had launched, as I said, 6 years ago, by leveraging blockchain. So that was one innovation which was truly, it was an industry first, and it made the headlines in the media, and clearly, it was a customer driven initiative. That was one. Let me give you one more. There is a product called telematics, in the insurance industry, which is in motor. So typically what happens is people drive cars. So you place a device in the car, and now this device makes your car a smart car. So now, you're able to get data in terms of your driving behavior. And using that one, of course, you can improve your own driving behavior, and you can have a more informed conversation with your insurer at time of renewal, right? Because based on your driving behavior, you can make it a much more, data-backed conversation. Now, what
Right.
happens in the Indian context? Many people use drivers, right? It's not that the person himself is driving the car.
Okay.
So we said, how do we launch telematics in India, but yet come out with a unique, Indian experience. So what we did, using our understanding of the Indian consumer and of course telematics technology, we launched a feature called geofencing. Again, it was an industry first. So now what happens in geofencing? I'll give an example. Let's say there is a couple and working couple with two kids, right? So let's say the driver in the morning drops husband and wife to work, drops kids to school. In the afternoon, while husband and wife are still at work, he picks up kids. Maybe he brings them back home. There's a maid, or maybe he takes them to daycare. Now, all said and done, in India, you are worried about kids' safety, right? Because you keep reading a lot.
Right.
What if the driver were to take the car off on a completely different route? Now, that's where geofencing comes into play. You get an alert, that this car is now being taken on a different route, not the typical route from the school to daycare or back home. So for customers, it became a huge peace of mind, and it was a completely new product in the marketplace. So I think by leveraging technology, but not giving standard offerings, but understanding customer needs and coming out with industry first solutions. I think these were, solutions, and as I said, these were launched nearly 6 years ago, which really kept us, ahead of the game.
Yeah, this one's amazing. I mean, this is such a peace of mind to parents to know
Yeah,
that my kids are on the road, but he's taken a different route. I think it's amazingly very, very heart-touching sort of a initiative. So I'm sure your customers would
right.
have loved it. You have feedback about
Absolutely.
that. Okay. But
Absolutely.
do you also do premiums going up or down based on the driving behavior, or that's because of the high incidence of drivers difficult to
Yeah.
control?
So that, see, when you look at telematics, there are two aspects, right? One I mentioned to you, is where, based on driving behavior, premiums, go
Right.
up and down.
Right.
That as a product, is separate, right? It's not
Right.
linked to this particular example. In this
Uh,
example, I basically wanted to highlight, how, geofencing, came to the fore as a completely
right.
different need. But yes,
Right.
in telematics, customers globally, when they're aware of this product, that's what it helps. The insurer and the customer have an informed conversation about the premium, when it's up for it.
I know there are health insurers doing that as well. So if you
Yeah.
uh, continue to keep yourself tested and your, you
Yes.
know, stats are improving, then your premium
Right.
actually goes down. I
Yeah.
mean, and that's also additional motivation for people. Not that you want
Correct.
to do it to save money, but you'd want it to
Correct.
stay healthy. But that's a good icing on the cake to say, okay, you save some money as well.
That's why I told you, that when you look at health insurance, what a insurer is doing, the focus is not only on illness, it's also on wellness. You see, then
Absolutely.
basically, you're present for the customer, doing a larger part of the entire life cycle, rather than,
Right.
mere hospitalization.
Mm. No, I appreciate. So I think we've had a pretty decent conversation, but before we get to the end, I'd like to ask you one question which I picked up from your profile. You've talked about something called 33, 33, 33. What is that about? Tell us.
Yeah. So, Anjali, that's basically, I get asked about this, quite a few times. That's basically, my management mantra, my leadership style, which I basically evolved, over the years, right? So typically there are questions asked, right? How much time do you spend on strategy? How much time do you spend on execution? And how much time, do you spend on, people, right? So this is what I've evolved over the years, that I spend
Okay.
33% of my time on strategy and looking ahead, 33% of my time on keeping the lights on because we're a large and existing business, and
Mm.
33% of my time on people, because unless and until I spend time with people and ensure that everybody knows living and bring that culture of caringly yours, right? We wouldn't be able to keep our customers happy. So I think it's how I wish to split my time, and thereby give for adequate focus to all my key deliverables.
Sounds like a great idea. And actually, the passion shows when you speak. With that caringly, yours seems to come truly from the heart. So I congratulate you for that.
Thank
And
you.
having said that, I also thank you for your time on this podcast and sharing with us all these insights and strategies and customer first thinking, which you brought to the table, which is pretty enlightening. Some of these examples, I'm sure, are ahead of the curve and something new for our listeners and our viewers to learn from. So thank you so much for bringing that to the table. And any last parting words before we sign off?
Yeah, firstly, from my side as well, thank you, Anjali. I think it was a lovely conversation. It was just a very natural, free-flowing conversation on,
Yeah,
customers. And I think,
yeah.
from a parting point of view, I think, go back to, what, Mahatma Gandhi said, right? The customer is the reason we exist, right? So I think it's just very important, that we keep that in focus, day in and day out, right? In my earlier company, Jack Welch, right, used to be there, he said, you start with, showing your face to the customer, and slowly you turn around, right? I think it's very important that you demonstrate that care, day in and day out.
Thank you so much for saying that. I think it completely mirrors my thinking on customers. I too totally believe that businesses will survive and thrive as long as they have paying customers, and companies that are able to see that connection and serve their customers are able to build their businesses for the longer run. And I think that's the thought to stay invested in. So thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it. And with that, I thank the viewers for joining us on this episode of CX Chats with your host, me, Anjali. I hope you've gained some valuable insights to enhance your experience about CX. And remember, your business success hinges a lot upon how your customers feel about you and your brand. So till the next time, continue to keep mastering the art of CX. Thank you. And by the way, if you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it within your network. Look forward to see you again next. Bye-bye.